Chapter 3. Attachment wounds don't stay in childhood. Two people can live through the same moment and come away carrying completely different emotional realities. You might get a message 3 hours later than usual and shrug while you finish dinner. Someone else might feel their stomach drop before they've even finished reading the reply. You might hear, "I need a little space," and take it as a temporary request. Someone else might hear those words and feel an alarm system switch on. You might get into a conflict and think, "This is hard, but we can work through it." Another person might think, "Something is breaking. I need to fix this right now or protect myself before it gets worse." The outside event may be the same. What it lands on is not. That difference shapes more than most relationship advice admits. A lot of modern advice treats relational problems as though there's one correct response. When someone pulls away, respond like this. When someone asks for reassurance, interpret it like that. When someone withdraws, label them this. When someone gets activated, label them that. Real relationships rarely work that cleanly. People don't respond to closeness, uncertainty, reassurance, or conflict in a vacuum. They respond through whatever their nervous system has learned about love, safety, dependence, loss, and the cost of letting someone close. That's the territory attachment theory tries to describe. The basic idea is simple enough. People form close emotional bonds early. Those bonds help shape expectations about self and others. Those expectations keep showing up later in adult intimate life. Researchers often talk about working models, the inner assumptions people carry about love, safety, and what they can expect from closeness. Those assumptions can last for years, but they aren't fixed forever. Later relationships can reinforce them, weaken them, or begin changing them. That's why relationship wounds don't stay in childhood. Childhood may write the first draft of the rules. Adult love is where those rules keep getting activated, tested, reinforced, and sometimes revised. Romance is one of the clearest places those patterns show themselves, because romantic bonds press directly on the need for closeness, reassurance, protection, and emotional safety. Online, this often gets flattened into cheap shorthand. Anxious, avoidant, secure, disorganized. People throw those words at each other after one breakup, one therapy reel, or one bad month of texting. The language gets used like a personality quiz or a courtroom exhibit. That misses the point. The value of this framework isn't that it gives people new insults or prettier excuses. It helps explain why closeness calms one person and destabilizes another. Why one partner hears a request while the other hears a threat. Why some people reach harder as love starts feeling uncertain, while others begin pulling away the more emotionally real things become. A better starting place is to ask simpler questions. What happens inside you when something important becomes less available? What happens when someone needs more from you emotionally? How easy is it to believe love will remain steady without constant proof? How much trust do you place in your own worth inside a bond? How much trust do you place in another person's ability to stay present without trapping, leaving, or disappointing you? These broad relational styles are useful as long as they stay broad. A more secure style usually comes with a steadier sense that closeness is survivable, that care can be given and received without constant crisis, and that conflict doesn't automatically mean abandonment. Anxiety often includes sharper sensitivity to signs of loss, inconsistency, and emotional distance. Avoidance often includes sharper sensitivity to pressure, dependence, engulfment, and the fear of losing autonomy inside closeness. Fearful or disorganized patterns often carry both hunger and fear at once. The desire for deep connection alongside the expectation that connection will become chaotic, painful, or unsafe. These categories help most when they're understood as patterns of regulation, not permanent identities. Most people aren't pure examples of them anyway. They're mixed. They're shaped by context. They may be one way with friends, another with family, another in romance. And different again when an older bruise gets hit in exactly the wrong place. Some look grounded until they feel truly attached. Others look distant until they feel safe enough to show how much fear sits underneath that distance. The labels help when they reveal a recurring emotional strategy. They stop helping when they get treated like total identities. The more useful question is what private rule sits underneath the strategy. Someone higher in attachment anxiety is often living with a nervous system that reacts quickly to changes in closeness. A late reply doesn't feel merely late. It feels loaded. A shift in tone doesn't feel minor. It can feel like the beginning of disappearance. Reassurance carries a great deal of weight because it's doing more than making them feel complimented. It's lowering threat. It's telling the body that the bond is still intact and that love isn't turning unstable overnight, and that they haven't quietly become disposable. That urgency can make an anxious partner reach in ways that strain the bond. Asking again, monitoring tone, pushing for clarity sooner than the other person can tolerate, wanting to talk while the other person wants time, reacting quickly because the fear is arriving quickly. Underneath is often a plea. Please show me I still count before this gets worse. Left unchecked, that fear can turn into protest behavior, such as repeated texting, testing, over-explaining, pleading, interrogating, or even threatening to leave and then panicking at the thought of actually leaving. Avoidance is organized around a different fear. Instead of being hyper-alert to signs of abandonment, the avoidance strategy is hyper-alert to signs of engulfment, exposure, obligation, or emotional pressure. Closeness may feel good until it starts asking something costly. Then the system begins to pull back. Space feels regulating, distance feels clarifying. Need can feel heavy long before the other person believes they're asking for anything unreasonable. Someone with stronger avoidant tendencies is often trying to manage an internal pressure other people don't fully see. Their fear sounds more like, if this gets too close, I'll lose freedom, control, self-possession, or the ability to breathe inside my own life. That's why some people seem genuinely warm and interested at the beginning, then become elusive once the bond starts carrying more emotional weight. It isn't always deception. Sometimes they really did want the closeness they were moving toward. Sometimes they still want it. The trouble is that wanting closeness and staying open inside closeness are two different things. Desire, affection, chemistry, comfort, validation, and sexual intensity can all be easier to tolerate than sustained emotional dependence. A person can want love and still have no idea how to remain undefended once love becomes real enough to alter their inner sense of freedom. Fearful or disorganized patterns can often be even more destabilizing because the person is often moving toward and away from intimacy at the same time. They want closeness, then mistrust it. They ask for reassurance, then doubt it once it arrives. They reach out, panic, withdraw, then feel abandoned by the distance they helped create. To the partner, it can feel maddening. To the person living in it, it often feels like being divided against yourself. The need is real, and the fear is real. Neither stays quiet for long. Security is worth describing carefully because it gets idealized so often. It doesn't mean emotionally invulnerable. It doesn't mean perfectly regulated, never jealous, never triggered, never hurt. It means a person is usually better able to remain inside themselves while love gets difficult. They're less likely to treat every wobble as catastrophe. They can ask for what they need more directly. They can tolerate some uncertainty without collapsing into panic or detachment. They can stay present in conflict without assuming conflict itself means the bond is dying. Security isn't perfection, it's steadiness. All of this gets so intense in romance because romance reaches part of the self ordinary life doesn't always touch. A person can be highly competent at work, reliable with friends, calm in day-to-day life, and then become startlingly reactive when a romantic partner goes cold, asks for more, or simply begins to mean too much. That doesn't mean the relationship created a whole new personality. It means the relationship touched an older rule. Somewhere inside, love pressed against a belief that has been waiting a long time to be triggered. That belief may sound like, if someone gets quieter, I'm about to be left, or if someone needs too much from me, I'm about to disappear into their needs, or if I rely on another person, I hand them the power to wound me, or if I'm not watchful, I'll miss the shift and get blindsided. These rules often feel like instinct because they were learned early and repeated often enough to start sounding like truth. Take Mara and Owen. Mara is 38 and has spent enough time in therapy to know that she gets anxious in relationships. Though she mostly hates the phrase because it sounds smaller than the experience actually feels. Owen is 39, self-sufficient, thoughtful, and the kind of man who doesn't make promises lightly. He also guards his independence as if someone is always trying to steal it. They meet through mutual friends and have the kind of early chemistry that feels relieving rather than chaotic. Mara feels chosen. Owen feels understood. For a while, both of those things are true. In the beginning, the differences between them almost look complementary. Mara is expressive, warm, quick to name what she feels. Owen is calm, competent, and steady in a way that makes her nervous system exhale. He likes that she brings softness into spaces where he usually stays grounded. She likes that he seems grounded enough to hold emotion without flinching. They spend weekends together, fall into routines, and start sharing more of their daily lives. To friends, they look good together. The problems begin when closeness stops being hypothetical. Mara notices that when they have a particularly connected weekend, Owen often goes quiet afterward. He's still polite, he still responds, but his energy changes. She feels it immediately. Her body starts scanning before her mind has even formed a thought. By Monday afternoon, she's wondering whether something's shifted. By Monday night, she wants reassurance. She asks if everything is okay. Owen hears the question and feels almost instantly that pressure is arriving. Nothing is wrong in the way Mara means. He just wants space to return to himself after a very intimate stretch. To him, that seems normal. To her, that retreat lands like emotional whiplash. He says he's fine, just tired. She tries to accept that answer, but it doesn't settle her. If he were fine, she thinks, he'd sound more like he did yesterday. She asks if he's sure. He gets shorter. She gets more alarmed. What began as a request for reassurance now feels to him like scrutiny. What began as his attempt to regulate himself now feels to her like the start of abandonment. Neither of them is inventing their reality. They're just not living in the same one. A week later, they argue about something small, a canceled dinner after Owen's workday ran long. Mara reacts to the cancellation with more intensity than Owen expects. She hears it as a sign that the relationship has slipped down his list. He hears her reaction as evidence that no normal human limit will ever be enough for her. She pushes for a real conversation that night because she can't sleep when things feel uncertain. He says he needs to cool off and talk tomorrow. To her nervous system, tomorrow feels like exile. To his, talking now feels like suffocation. So they do what most anxious avoidant partners do. Each moves harder in the direction that calms themselves and further disturbs the other. Mara texts more, Owen withdraws more. Mara explains more, Owen shuts down more. She experiences his distance as proof that she was right to panic. He experiences her pursuit as proof that closeness becomes pressure. By the next day, the canceled dinner is no longer the real issue. They're fighting about the fears underneath it, though neither one is naming these fears clearly enough for the other to understand them. This repeats for months in different forms. Owen initiates closeness, then seems strained by the very intimacy he wanted. Mara feels the strain and moves toward him for reassurance, which makes him feel less safe and more crowded. He starts telling himself she's impossible to satisfy. She starts telling himself that he only likes love when it asks nothing from him. Both conclusions contain some truth, but neither gets to the center of what is happening. Mara and Owen define safety differently. Mara feels safest when the bond is explicit, stable, and emotionally confirmed. Owen feels safest when there's room to breathe, room to retreat without being interpreted, and room to remain fully himself while staying connected. Her bid for steadiness lands in him as demand. His bid for space lands in her as disappearance. They aren't just disagreeing about communication style, they're activating each other's core defenses. That doesn't make the damage harmless. Mara can become accusatory when she feels scared. Owen can become evasive and withholding when he feels cornered. Both wound the other. Understanding the dynamic doesn't turn hurt into innocence. It does, however, explain why two people can keep recreating the same painful cycle while each genuinely feels misunderstood. A lot of couples never reach that level. They stay busy arguing about surface behavior and never get down to the rules organizing it. She thinks, if he cared, he'd reassure me without acting like it costs him something. He thinks, if she cared, she'd trust me enough to let me have space. Each is asking the other to behave in a way that would calm them without seeing that the requested behavior directly agitates the other person's oldest fear. Once you see that, a great deal of adult romantic pain stops looking random. A partner who panics when something grows quiet is reacting through a system trained to read distance as danger. A partner who shuts down when a loved one gets emotional is reacting through a system trained to read need as pressure or loss of self. The fearful partner who swings between longing and distrust is often trying to survive two incompatible impulses at once. The steadier partner in the same situation isn't necessarily loving less. They're often operating from a less threatening internal script, and that script shapes more than outward behavior. Two people can both ask for space, but one is doing it from stability and the other from panic. Two people can both want reassurance, but one is asking for ordinary comfort and the other is trying to lower a threat level that feels physically urgent. Bonding patterns aren't only about what someone does. They're about what the action means to them and what danger they believe they're preventing by doing it. Adult experience has a huge role here. These patterns are influenced by childhood, but they don't stay frozen there. Later, secure bonds can soften old fears. Repeated inconsistency, betrayal, or emotional neglect can make someone less secure than they once were. The inner model shifts. It gets shaped again and again by the relationships a person lives through. Some people call that kind of change earned security. The phrase is useful because it reminds us that steadiness isn't always something handed to us early and kept forever. Sometimes it's built later. Sometimes it's built after damage. A person who used to shut down the second intimacy felt heavy can learn to stay in the conversation a little longer and speak more plainly. They may still feel the urge to pull back, but instead of disappearing for 3 days, they say, "I'm overloaded and I need a little space, but I'm not leaving." That isn't perfection, it's practice. This is where attachment language can become fatalistic very quickly. Someone says, "I'm avoidant," and uses it to justify withholding, vagueness, or disappearing. Someone says, "I'm anxious," and uses it to justify relentless monitoring, overcontact, or emotional overreach. Someone else calls himself disorganized and acts as though contradiction itself absolves them. Labels are useful when they reveal a recurring strategy. They become dangerous when they get used as permission slips. A pattern can help explain behavior. It can't do the hard work for you. It can't repair what fear keeps damaging. It can't make harm harmless after the fact. That distinction matters because those bruises can do real damage in adult love. Anxiety can become controlling. Avoidance can become cold or evasive. Fearfulness can become chaos that injures both sides repeatedly. The point of understanding these patterns isn't to crown one type good and the others bad. The point is to become accountable for what your fear makes you do. Adult relationships activate older attachment scripts, and those scripts shape how love gets interpreted. They shape what feels safe, what feels threatening, what gets pursued, what gets avoided, and why the same moment can hit two people so differently. Without that understanding, adult romantic pain keeps looking irrational when it's often painfully patterned. With that understanding, a person can begin to see that their reactions are neither random nor destiny. They're learned responses still speaking. The hopeful part is that learned responses can change. Usually not in one clean turn, and usually not just because someone found the right label. More often they change through repetition, honesty, and enough steadier experience that the old script stops running everything. That change can happen in therapy. It can happen in a healthier relationship. It can happen because a person gets tired of watching the same fear ruin the same part of life. But it usually begins in the same space, seeing the pattern clearly enough to stop calling it fate. Attachment language is useful when it helps a person see themselves more honestly. It stops helping when it turns into a costume, an excuse, or a way to dodge responsibility or accountability. The hard truth is simple. People don't only react to what's happening now. They react to what the moment touches. Until that's understood, many will keep repeating the same suffering with different faces and call it fate. Once it's understood, the pain is still real, but it becomes visible. And visible patterns have a real chance of changing.